Welcome to the Museum of Aquarium and Pet History. So lock your door, buckle up, get your latte ready, turn on your busy signal on your phone, and we're going to talk about L.E. Smith. L.E. Smith, the glass company. So we will talk about their iconic bowls that they produced, which was this kingfish fish bowl that they produced in 1931. But we need to talk about the company itself before we talk about that, because the company has a really interesting history. I'd like to thank, before I start, Tom Felt of the American Museum of Glass in West Virginia, who actually wrote the book on L.E. Smith. Great book if you want to know more about them. And also the Whibble family, if I pronounce that right. They actually have a blog, and they were the ones that actually were the main owners of L.E. Smith for the majority of L.E. Smith's industrial lifetime. So let's start. So who was L.E. Smith? The legend and the reality. The legend was he was a bit of a drifter, kind of harsh if you ask me. But they said he was a drifter. He went from job to job. He did have a little stint as a chef, and he created a gourmet mustard. So all his friends said, hey, this mustard is unbelievable. I mean, I've never tasted mustard like this. You need to bottle it. Now remember, this is over 100 years ago. They didn't have plastic, so everything was in a glass jar. So normally you would go to a glass company and you'd buy jars for your mustard. No, not L.E. Smith. He bought the factory. So he bought a glass producing factory for his mustard product. Who does that? So that's really the legend behind the man. Now let's talk a little bit about the reality here. So the reality was that he did go from job to job. It's known that he had at least 10 jobs working for glass companies throughout the United States. He did hold major positions in those companies that he worked for. So in other words, he was like the main salesperson. He was the main glass decorator. At one time, he was a manager. So it wasn't like he didn't have a high position in these companies. He actually did have a high position. So what happened was he worked for a while for McKee Jeanette Glass, which at one time was the largest glass company in the United States, if not the world. During that time, he met a person that became a good friend of his. That was the Whibble family. And actually, the Whibble family, he convinced them to basically take the decorating department of McKee Glass and make it into a separate company, because the parent company had gone into receivership. So he wanted to take that separate glass decorating company, make it into a separate glass factory, and he convinced his friends to basically invest into that company with him, and they named it L.E. Smith after him. But he wasn't the major stockholder, so they asked the Whibbles, why did you name it L.E. Smith when you guys were the major stockholders? And they said, well, because Whibble was a hard name to remember and L.E. Smith is not. So even though Lou Smith, and that was his name, Lou, even though he only worked there for like 4 years, they kept the name for their entire lifespan, which was 103 years. They opened in 1907 and they closed in 2010, 103 years in business. So pretty amazing that they lasted that long. So that is a little bit about Lou Smith, or L.E. Smith. So let's talk about the bowls. In 1931, okay, Lou Smith was gone by then, and one of the Whibbles actually was enamored by goldfish and decided he would make this goldfish bowl. And normally when you make a goldfish bowl, yeah, you make a round bowl in 5 different sizes based on gallonage. But he made a bowl shaped like a fish, and he got a patent on it. He got a design patent on it. It's said that he actually marketed the bowl through George Bogfelt and Company. Sold them in 1931 for $1.95 each for the clear one. It was more expensive for the Vaseline glass one. Even though it looks like green depression glass, it is actually uranium glass, also called Vaseline glass. But this one isn't yellow like most Vaseline glass. This is actually green, but it does glow under black light. And Today's money, that would be about $20.71, but the average person made between $18 and $28 a week. So to buy one of these bowls back in 1931 was a week's salary. And you got to remember, the Great Depression was at the end of 1928, so this was really during the Great Depression that these bowls came out. Now they made them in, of course, clear crystal. They made them in the green uranium glass, which glowed. They made them in a ribbed glass, and the ribbed one they called the, not the Fish King, but the Fish Queen. So the ribbed one had a different name to it. And then they made one with this large base on it. And I always thought, just my thinking pattern here was that, you know, they came out with one and people thought there wasn't enough room for fish because it's only maybe a gallon in size. So they made this extended version one. But no, they both came out at the same time. So that's kind of interesting. And this one has a scale pattern on it where the clear one and the green one don't have a scale pattern. The other thing is that these are wider at the top. This one is much narrower at the top. So these are a little under a gallon each, where this one here is about a gallon, less than a gallon and a half. So it's not a lot bigger, believe it or not, even though it has the little base on it. Today, these sell all over the map, anywhere from $50 for the clear one up to $150 for the clear one. The Vaseline ones are anywhere from $200 to $1,200, and the rib ones around $300 and up. So that's really about the going price of what they sell for in today's marketplace. To me, they look like a compote, like a bowl that you'd put in the middle of your table and you put fruit in, but they were actually a fish bowl. They were advertised as a fish bowl, and they did make them in a minimum of four different designs. I think there's actually more than this. I think that the ribbed one actually came in a higher version with a little area on the bottom, and I also think that the clear one came with a different base. The base that's on this one right here, I've seen it on the clear one as well. So it's interesting that that basically that this guy loved these bowls so much that he got a design patent on them, and then he marketed them for so many years. So I don't know how many are on the market, but they do come up every year on eBay and places like that. They are really, really interesting, and these are uranium glass, so I think that's pretty cool. So one thing also about L.E. Smith, one thing that they did that was very iconic was that they made the headlights for Henry Ford's Model T cars. So the glass for those headlights was made by L.E. Smith. They also were the company that developed black glass. Now you might have heard me talk about milk glass, and milk glass is a white, creamy, milk-looking glass that a lot of people mistake it for porcelain sometimes. People that sell jewel aquariums and they'll have a piece of milk glass on the bottom. They'll say it's porcelain. It's not. It's actually milk glass. But they made black glass. So if you ever get a chance and you are hopping around eBay, type in L.E. Smith and look at all the glass they make. It's beautiful. It really is. So whatever happened to Lou Smith or L.E. Smith? Basically, Charlie Wibble and a few friends set him up as a major domo of the Old Bush Run Club, which was a private poker and whiskey retreat for men. There he happily stayed until his death in 1931. He left no family but many friends. That's not exactly true. We know that he did have a family. We know that he was married at one time, that he had 3 kids. He had, 2 girls and 1 boy. So those kids would have been born around 1910 to 1920s. So I don't think they'd be alive today, but their grandchildren should. So if any of the grandchildren are watching this video, get in touch with us because we would love to know more about your grandfather. We love to set the story straight because there's so many legends and rumors about Lou Smith and what he did with his mustard and buying a glass company, which was pretty crazy. So that is all I have today about L.E. Smith. Now you know everything about the L.E. Smith kingfish and queenfish. All right? All right, guys. Thank you, and I'll see you again next week.
highlands in western Pennsylvania. It's a 12-month wonderland of natural beauty. Nestled here in the western foothills of the Alleghenies is the small town of Mount Pleasant. Founded over 125 years ago, it's now home for some 6,000 persons. It's here in Mount Pleasant that for over half a century, the L.E. Smith Glass Company has been making fine handmade glass.
The making of handmade glass is much the same as it was in the last century. True, we have made some refinements in controls and raw material which add to the quality of the glass, but the methods remain virtually identical. We have second and third generation workers at their trade. But better than me telling you about it, let me show you.
The basic material in the raw batch is silica sand. In addition, there are many other materials in varying amounts, such as potash, lead, selenium, ferrous oxide, and so on. Each color has its own recipe, which is guarded zealously. The batch is placed in the tank or furnace and melted at approximately 2600 degrees Fahrenheit. When it is properly melted, it's allowed to cool to 1800 degrees, at which temperature it is worked. It is gathered by hand and dropped in the mold. The presser then presses it. The turning out boy takes it from the mold, where the warming in boys take over and reheat the piece for further forming. This reheating also gives the piece a high luster fire polish, which can be achieved in no other way. Then the finisher finishes it to the desired shape. The crystal glass is melted in the tank. From it is made the punch sets and the penny candy jars. This tank continuously melts the glass as the pieces are pulled from the other end. Here at the L.E. Smith Glass Company, we also blow glass in the time-honored fashion. These men are working in much the same manner as their forefathers before them. Here they are producing our early American reproduction flasks. The glass, when leaving the finishing shop, is still very hot, and to prevent it from cooling too fast, causing improper annealing, it is placed in an annealing furnace. This annealing furnace is 80 feet long, and the belt carries the ware through in about 2 hours. When the glass reaches the other end, it is still quite warm, but can be handled by hand. It's picked off the leer and put on skids to be taken to the inspectors and packers. It is here that each piece is put through our inspection program, and only those pieces are selected for shipment that can pass our rigid specifications. Here is where we start shipment of the famous Smith glass to all parts of the United States, as well as many foreign countries.
Here at our sample room, we have all the pieces that we produce here. Many people from all 50 states of the Union and many foreign countries have visited us here. We hope that you have enjoyed your visit with us and that you have learned a little of the romance of the manufacture of handmade Smith glass.